It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Hello and welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio Channel 147. I am your host for the entire week, Lyndsey Smith, and I am absolutely chuffed to be here. Don't know what chuffed means? Google it. It's a great word. Okay, so it is Agronomic Monday. We are going to have some really cool discussions with Mr. Peter Johnson. He, of course, is our resident agronomist here with Real Agriculture. He's going to join me for the last two segments of the show. We've got some big questions on harvest here in Ontario. Of course, dawn in the corn crop. And I want to know, and I would love to get your feedback on this one too, when you add bins. So for those of you in Western Canada, I feel like we've got a pretty good handle on this. Of course, on-farm storage, far more extensive in Western Canada. It is the norm. There are good reasons for that. Ontario's a bit of an odd duck when it comes to these things, and I've learned since moving here that part of the reason why more farmers didn't and haven't invested in on-farm storage is, well, it's a matter of logistics. Realistically, they don't have to travel nearly as far to deliver crop, and unlike a lot of the Western Canadian crops like soybeans or even wheat, when it comes off, that's actually seasonally not a bad time to sell. And so, unlike the West, where you probably want to hold on to crop to make some better decisions on the pricing side, the same economics haven't always worked out here for Ontario. However, as farms, of course, have gotten bigger in Ontario, and as some farms start to specialize in things like IP beans, or as we stretch to those longer season varieties and hybrids, it does beg the question, have we reached a sort of tipping point where more on-farm storage really makes sense? And definitely I would say, and I'm going to ask Peter about this, but I would say anecdotally, either I'm seeing more bins going up in the area, or definitely more talk about putting bins and dryers, of course, too, or at the very least aeration. Because let's face it, when conditions are not great at harvest, having a wet bin, having a dryer, having some fans to run on that crop can mean all the difference in staying rolling in that critical harvest time. All right, so that's at the end of the show. This week, if you haven't noticed, and frankly, you must not be on social media if you haven't noticed, because so yesterday was Sunday. That was sort of the pre-day for Agritechnica happening in Hanover, Germany. This is the first time in 4 years that this show has gone. This is a massive, massive equipment show. Farmers from all over the world are right now in Germany checking out the latest thing, literally kicking the tires, if you will. Of course, the Real Agriculture team is there. So big thank you to Corteva AgriScience and to Optimum for sponsoring our coverage of going. And so we've got Shaun Haney, we've got Bern Tobin, we've got Jason Stroeve and Rylan Haney, who, yes, Shaun's daughter, all on location covering the latest and greatest from Agritechnica. So this week, you are going to hear every day, we are going to have a segment from the show from the day before. But if you don't want to wait to see all the cool videos, head immediately now to our YouTube channel. And we have already started the video coverage of the show. There is an Agritechnica 2023 playlist if you want to subscribe to that. Or at the very least, go take a peek at what everybody is looking at right now. And that is New Holland's new CR11 Combine. We, of course, got the sneak peek. We got the video. It's already online. It's doing... A lot of people have watched it, let me put it that way, and you're going to want to take a look. It's pretty snazzy, and one of the things that you're going to hear from, I think, this week, and Shaun's already written a bit of a column and done a bit of a video report on this one as well, is 4 years ago, 2019, huge push into the electric side. Just electric everywhere. And this show really seeing a lot of more practical solutions for things where electric is a component of some of these new pieces of equipment being floated out, but not the only component. So a lot lot more hybrid systems, still lots of autonomy, but that purely electric model is not necessarily front and center like it was. So Shaun's got some thoughts on that. We're going to visit all the big names, of course, and Kloss and John Deere, but then, of course, some of the smaller runs like Garenhoff, Nexat, the Reuben, like you name it, they're going to go and check it out. What's really cool, though, is that there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff that we've probably never seen before, which is always a cool part of this show. So stick around for that. You're going to hear some of that on the show, of course, but check out that YouTube channel. Head on over there, and you can watch all the video as well. Okay. Also on today's show, I've got a snippet that I pulled from the Sharp Edge. So the Sharp Edge is a video series that we do here in conjunction with Mazex, and looking at new equipment things. And so we've got a discussion on droning on cover crops into soybeans, but also just using drones in agriculture in general. So super cool there. So hang around for that. And I wanted to share some feedback that we've had to the recent couple weeks of shows, and the Friday issues panel, of course, a lot of fun. I really had a great time on Friday. If you didn't catch it, please head back to RealAgriculture.com. You can subscribe to the podcast and have it show up on your phone. You don't even have to be here on SiriusXM, but we do love that you catch it here too. And there's been a lot of discussions about sort of what does the future of agriculture look like, and the people component of that. And I got some really good feedback on some of the coverage that we've been doing about, the Canadian Agriculture Human Resource Council work that they've been doing. We've got a new campaign out, the I Am Ag campaign. And one of the key things that some people pointed out is that we as an industry probably need to take a really hard look in the mirror as to what we offer, not just salary-wise, but what we offer for flexibility and how much we've modernized what a role on a farm or in a farm business might look like. Because realistically, if you've grown up on a farm or your third or fourth generation farm, there's a certain amount of, you work in acres, not hours, and there's a certain badge of honor for how little sleep you get, and there's, all these sorts of things that we pride ourselves on. But realistically, that's because we own this business, or we own the land, or we're part of this multi-generational family. And so there's this huge other driver to doing that. And I'm not saying that it's always entirely healthy either. Let's just drop that there. But anyway, the other thing is, if we're going to expect people from outside agriculture or outside our farms to be as committed as we are, the roles are probably going to have to look a little bit different. We're probably going to have to remember that people want actual holidays when they want to take holidays. People want benefits. They need insurance. There needs to be perks. And they're not necessarily just off the hop going to be willing to devote every evening or weekend whenever it needs to be, unless there's balance there. And this isn't just about the farm. This is really about the industry as a whole, through the ag retail side, through so many. Have we done enough to modernize the roles that we set out? And I'll be honest, even on our farm, we probably have not, in that we still tend to hire seasonally, which isn't terribly attractive to a lot of people. And we probably put way too much focus on labor as opposed to learning. And it's a problem, because as much as we have lucked out and had some really great people come work for us, every year is a bit of a struggle to try and find someone and try and convince them that, like, this is fun, this is, engaging work, this is satisfying work, and this is meaningful. People don't always necessarily see that right off the hop. So I would love your feedback on that. And of course, anything else we talk about on the show, 1-855-776-6147. Let's take a quick break. I will be back with more on this show. I'm looking so forward to today and all week, and we'll be back right after this.
Give your soybeans an obvious advantage with Lalfix Pro Yield Liquid Soybean from Lalwin Plant Care. Its exclusive formulation amplifies nitrogen fixation. That means a greener, higher-yielding soybean crop and enhanced ROI. The single bladder means there's no mixing, and the available collapsible cube simplifies shipping. It's the inoculant with a difference you can see. Contact your Lalman sales representative today.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
There's power, and then there's superpower. Advancing the unstoppable superpower of pre-seed from New Farm. Take control. Eliminate weed competition and start clean in spring. Manage weeds early in canola, cereals, and pulses. Conquer, Goldwing, Thunderhawk, and Blackhawk EVO. Convenient formulations and multiple modes of action. Add more power to glyphosate, more benefits to your burn down. Go to newfarm.ca/burndown.
Hello and welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Monday, November 13th. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and I'm going to be with you all week, y'all. So pretty excited about this. I've got some big plans for the week, but I would love to hear if there's something you would like me to cover, even if we don't get to it this week. Give me a note on the old email system, lsmith@realagriculture.com, or you can message me across social media or call that feedback line, 855-776-6147. Let me know. Make sure that we're actually covering what we should be. Right? Whatever is keeping you up at night, whatever you find most interesting. And of course, after this segment, we are going to hear from Shaun Haney and your friendly neighborhood radio producer, Jason Stroeve, who are in Germany right now for Agritechnica. So we'll hear from them after this segment. But today, we are going to talk about, and if anyone follows along on the Agronomist, you know just a few weeks ago, we covered this topic as well. And so this clip is from the latest episode of The Sharp Edge, that's brought to you by Masex, on droning on crop, droning on cover crop, and really it's a look into what our capacity is, what does this open up for us, and it's a really great chat. So this is Bernd Tobin and Henry Prinzen talking about the capacity to drone on crop.
I'm Bernard Tobin. Welcome to the Sharp Edge. Joined again by Henry Prinzen, Masex agronomist. Sir, how's it going?
Great. Burn yourself?
I'm pretty good. Hey, we're feeling a little chilly here today, but we're down near Sweeburg, Ontario. We're going to hang out with James Hammerton, who farms with his family. Now, James was on the Sharp Edge. We featured his stripper header 3 years ago. Why is James back on the Sharp Edge?
So James continues to push the envelope, try some new stuff. So James actually met up with Drone Spray Canada, and they brought out this big drone, 12-foot tip to tip, and we applied cover crop seed into standing soybeans. Pretty cool. You know, James is trying to establish a cover crop stand, some clovers, and maybe get an N credit next year for his corn crop and push that nitrogen use efficiency lever a little bit higher. So James is just trying some new things, but James is always pushing the envelope. So.
Hey, let's see what James Hammerton is up to now.
Hey James, so we're out here in Oxford County. Can you give us a little bit of a snapshot of what you're doing and where you're farming?
Yeah, definitely. We farm right here near Woodstock, Ontario. Primarily a cash crop operation with corn, beans, and wheat. Crushed beans, no IPs. And we do a lot of no-till, minimum tillage, and we're just trying out some new things with cover crops this year. Mostly for the reason that it was exciting to use a drone. We thought we'd give that a whirl, so we're out here in a field where we did some of that.
Right on, James. So, you know, I also know working with you, we're seeing you do some different things with your fertility strategies. You know, what are some things that you've been trying to do to increase your nitrogen use efficiency? You know, how can we bring that pound of nitrogen and get more bushels out of it? What are you doing to do that?
We've picked up a bit more rental land, and we're trying to be better about our fertilizer placement. So we've gone to banding on the planter to try to get the dry fertilizer where it needs to be. We've noticed some nice gains from that. And we're also trying to put the nitrogen on at a better time in season through the use of Y drops and foliar. And, you know, thinking maybe some cover crops in the fall would help with some nitrogen capture, and just kind of giving it a whirl, sort of like a holistic approach, trying everything out a little bit to try to make all the gains we can, I guess.
So James, I know you did try, you know, some Invita and 2 apps with the Y drop, right? You're trying to spoon feed the crop. Is that kind of what you're thinking of doing going forward?
I think so, yeah. It's kind of nice to use less nitrogen. It's pretty easy to put a economic value on that, and it's kind of fun to Y drop, and yeah, it works out well with our schedule. It takes a bit of the onus off in the spring, and we can drag out our nitrogen through the summer a bit more, and it seems to work very well. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about cover crops. It's kind of why we're here. We got this drone out to go seed down some cover crop in some fields. You know, what did the drone do for you, and you know, what timing was that, and what was kind of your goal there?
So we were reluctant to put cover crops on and standing beans, when they were getting close to maturity, and the drone sort of presented itself. And so we thought we'd give that a whirl, not do any crop damage at all. And so we got the drone in mid-September, and we were aiming for 10% leaf drop on the beans, drop some cover crops down, and we were maybe a bit late this fall getting it on. The timing was a bit strange to work out.
So James, this drone that came out, how big was it? How many acres an hour was it getting done? How often did it have to refill? A lot of people have a lot of questions how effective, these drones are, how fast stuff can get done with them.
Yeah, I was quite surprised, Henry, at how fast it actually does go. I think they were covering 25 acres an hour theoretically. We were at a fairly low rate of 10 pounds per acre, so there weren't many refills, but they were fairly consistent. I think battery life was a bit of an issue. The wind speed was an issue. Keeping away from trees, it's similar to a helicopter, but on a smaller scale. They're concerned about trees. But overall, it worked very, very well. It was very timely.
So James, the drone went out. What kind of cover crop was it actually spreading, into the beans? What was your goal with that cover crop?
We ultimately want to fix some more nitrogen for next year's corn crop. So we used vetch and a couple different clover cuts, and just hoping they'll get established and hoping they have the survivability for the winter time. So we just went pretty simple this year. Like, the cover crop world is extravagant. We could have gone with a very extensive blend, but we thought we'd keep it simple and just leave some test strips and see if we got a catch in the fall. And whether it shows up green in the spring or not is the question.
Yeah, so we talk about green in the spring. So what's your goal? Plant green? Are we going to work it? Are we going to burn it off? What's your plan? Or are you're not really sure? You're going to kind of evaluate how it looks in the spring?
I think that's exactly right. I like to spray, so we will definitely burn it off at some point. If planting green works out well with the right spring and we get pushed for time, I'm not against that either. It's sort of a gigantic experiment at this time. We only did about 100 acres, so we're not really over a barrel here with timing, and we might do a little bit of everything just to see how it works out.
So, we talk about ROI. At the end of the day, we need to make money. It's fun to do these things. It's great for the environment, sure, but we actually just want to make some money. So how are we going to measure ROI, James, on this project here?
We sort of went with the 10 pounds per acre of seed and the drone cost to average about $50 an acre expense. So we're hoping to get back the equivalent value in nitrogen credit the following spring. And we're going to do soil nitrate tests to see if we can get any nitrogen credit back, I guess. And that would be the ultimate goal.
Yeah, for sure. Like for corn, we're going to need 10 bushels to justify, even consider the cost of doing it, right?
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, James, where do you see cover crops, the drone fitting in your operation long term? Do you see a lot more fit, or you're just kind of, wade into this and see where it goes?
I think drones in general are definitely going to be more prevalent in the operation. Maybe not perhaps for cover crops, but for spraying, of course. But if they can fit in like this and the timing works out, then yeah, we're not against doing it some more. It's great.
So there you have it. Henry, when I watch this video, what I see is James really looking to the future and leveraging innovation.
Yeah, so James is always pushing the envelope, looking at new innovation, and I think, there's going to be a big push in agriculture for drones. I think there's going to be a big spot, fungicides in corn, avoid tramping, cover crop applications in beans, standing beans, some big plays, and, those different areas, maybe nutrient deficiencies in pockets, we can go out with the drone and just apply that. I think there's going to be a big push in agriculture to drones, and this is just a start, right? So we'll see. And on the other side, James is, worrying about nitrogen, making sure we use it to the best effect out there, and let's bring that nitrogen per bushel down, and let's increase those crop yields and keep pushing forward.
Thanks, Henry. Another great episode of The Sharp Edge. We'll see you next time.
All right, and with that, as promised, we're going to hop to a quick break, and you'll hear from Shaun Haney and Jason Stroeve straight from Germany right after this.
What were the issues in your fields this year? Did you do a soil sample? What is your soil sample telling you about some of the nutrient issues that you might be having going into next year? What herbicides did you use? What residues you might be concerned about? What weed issues did you have? What crop residues did you have? How well do you know your fields?
Get the answers to all the questions you have about your pulse crop at the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com.
Proven seed is at home in your soil. With the widest seed portfolio in Western Canada, our seed is developed and tested on and for your local acres. Our hybrids and varieties are tested by hundreds of growers, so we know how our seed will perform in your local conditions. Better returns start with seed that belongs where it's planted, and this seed belongs here. Secure your seed today at your local Nutrien Ag Solutions or visit provenseed.ca to learn more.
Have you heard of Vantage Ag? They're a manufacturer and distributor of liquid fertilizers, and they want to work with you. They want to learn more about you and your goals and build a relationship centered around high-value products and a customized approach. For more information on Vantage Ag, call Paul Sinkovich at 778-919-3370 or visit vantage.ag to get started today.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. We're reporting from Hanover, Germany at Agritechnica 2023. It's great to be with you. Hopefully everybody's having yourself a great Monday. Real Agriculture's coverage of Agritechnica 2023 is brought to you by Optimum Glide, a new canola trait technology from Corteva AgriScience. And right now we're on the trade show floor. We're having a great time. We're really taking in a ton of innovation. I'm joined by, long-time Real Agriculture video producer, Jason Stroeve. Jay, are you enjoying the show here? We're recording this Sunday night. So we're just finishing day one. How's it been for you?
Everything bleeds together. I'm working on about 15 minutes sleep from last night. And previous to that was 24 hours of no sleep on the plane. One good sleep. Everything's blurring together. But so far, so good.
Yeah, it is, and man, I'll tell you what, it's busy here. You can really feel the pace has continued to pick up in terms of the amount of people that are walking down these aisles. By the time you get to about Wednesday, Thursday for sure, it's like a concourse at the Super Bowl. It's so packed. You know, we haven't been to an Agritechnica due to the pandemic since 2019. You and I were talking about some of the things that we've really noticed that are somewhat maybe changed, but maybe have not necessarily advanced or gone any further. One thing is, and we haven't stopped at all the major manufacturers yet, but from the ones we have visited with, we're hearing a lot less about, hey, here's our prototype of a fully electrified tractor. When we were here in 19, everybody had a prototype, one they were talking about, showing off. Not a lot close to commercialization, and we haven't seen a lot of that at all here.
No, next to nothing. It was probably been 4 to 6 years since there's been any kind of movement on that we've seen, for sure. Yeah. But you're right, every single booth we went to of the big manufacturers had a concept vehicle that was fully electric. Now we're seeing more, it looks to be more focused on hybrid.
Yeah.
So whether it's electric drives or something like that, yeah, a lot less focus on fully electric, more on electric assist.
Yeah, diesel powered, but there's electric motors, and whether it's on the axles or it's actually on the implement. We're seeing a lot of the electrification of the implement. We're also speaking of implements, a lot of focus on the intelligence of the implement. With different manufacturers that we've met with here today, there's been a lot of the tractor, it's got this smart technology, it's doing this, it's doing that, there's sensors, but it needs to communicate because there's possibly no operator in the future sitting in that cab. There needs to be sensors and intelligence happening at the implement as well, where that tractor, that power unit, and the implement are working together. It was interesting, we were at Kloss, and it wasn't full autonomy. They were talking about essentially almost like I compared it to an airline pilot, basically where everything is planned out beforehand. That operator is basically sitting there and just observing, not necessarily steering, not necessarily handling any of the knobs and the dials, but basically just observing and being that sort of supervisor running through the field.
Yeah, I'd say honestly, if we were to look at a theme for this year's Agritechnica, it would probably be jumping the gun. So it looks like in all those areas, it seemed like they put the cart before the horse. Yeah. And now things are scaling back to what seems to be manageable, which is still a step in the right direction, but definitely a step back.
More of a reality check. That's how I would call so far this year. It feels like a little bit more of a reality check in that area. The other piece for sure that we've heard a lot about in terms of why this technology, why this innovation, labor. It's almost come up in like
every single conversation.
Every single conversation, or for sure every 3 out of 4 conversations where this solves a labor problem. Eastern Europe, labor problem. Western Europe, labor problem. North America, labor problem. It continues to come up, and companies trying to find solutions to assist the farmer who's having a hard time finding highly qualified operators to run this kind of technology. Never mind a warm body, somebody that can actually operate some of this stuff at a high level. So that's kind of the observations, I think, from day one. We're going to continue to report findings and observations throughout the week. Big shout out to everybody from Corteva AgriScience and, of course, their new canola trait technology, Optimum Glide, for sponsoring our coverage. Make sure you go to RealAgriculture.com and you can check out the New Holland Combine. That video is up. So if you want to check out the New Holland Combine, I believe it's the largest in the market. Bern Tobin from Real Agriculture filmed that video. Make sure you check out RealAgriculture.com or our YouTube channel to see what that is all about. So on behalf of Jason Stroeve and myself, we're going to take a break, and we'll be back with Lyndsey Smith and the rest of RealAg Radio.
CDC Endure is a new oat line from Alliance Seed. High yielding with excellent disease resistance and the quality end users ask for, all in one great oat variety. CDC Endure provides the high beta-glucan levels to make heart-healthy products like breakfast cereals. For more information on CDC Endure oats, as well as any other products from Alliance Seed, check out allianceseed.com or visit any Alliance Seed authorized retailers.
There's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup, weed control, field trial results, yield strategies, and so much more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF, Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest podcast today.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio here on this Agronomic Monday. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and this segment is brought to you by Grow Canada. The world needs more of what Canada grows. Join the agriculture industry leaders from across the country at Grow Canada in Calgary from November 28th to 30th. Visit growcanadaconference.ca to register now. Always a super great conference. Okay, bringing in resident agronomist Peter Johnson. Peter, how are you?
I'm awesome, thanks, Lyndsey. It is a sunny day. You and I don't do this as often as Shaun and I, but Shaun knows if the sun is shining, Pete is happy. And so corn harvest is underway. Most of the soybeans are out of the field. There's still a few out there, but it looks like we're going to get maybe 4 days in a row with sunshine and dry temperatures, or dry weather rather, and we might actually get the last of the soybeans out of the field. So, and maybe, just maybe, Pete will get the last of his wheat plots planted this week. That would be a real win to be done.
Okay, wait a minute. So let's back up a second. First of all, I thought you were going to say we would get some corn off, but no. Apparently we're going to talk about getting the last of the soys, because frankly, that needs done. And we're sneaking into middle of November here, Pete. I thought we were supposed to park the planter. Or is it drive on? We still got to get this wheat in.
So if you can plant wheat in fit soil conditions this time of year, you have every bit as much yield potential as you do 2 weeks ago, because we haven't lost any heat, Lyndsey. Like, I have a grower who texted me last night, and he planted wheat, I think he said on October the 19th, and it has gained 34 growing degree days. Like, that's nothing. So wheat planted in good soil conditions in southwestern Ontario, mid-November, can still be 110 bushel per acre wheat. We've done it. I bet you we've done it for the last 15 years in a row. If I am finished before Remembrance Day, it's a miracle. And we have done it as late as December the 11th on the frost. But you have to, you just can't mud it in. If you mud it in, then it's a recipe for not having good wheat.
Right. Okay. So that's the key point. Everybody out there, keep rolling so long as the soil says you can go. So there you go. That's a good point. Okay. Go ahead.
So, Lyndsey, just before we leave that, a couple of growers have reached out as well because, well, even Pete's wheat that he seeded on the 2nd of October, we've had so much rain through October and early November and heavy, fast rains that I have a couple of drown-out spots on systematically tiled silt loam soil that we never get drownouts. But so if I get the chance, when I'm doing my wheat plots, I will go through there, and in those small drown-out areas, I will seed more wheat. So patch it in if you get the chance this week. If we get another deluge, it won't work. But if it turns into winter, you can patch in those and have wheat instead of weeds in those areas, and that's always a good thing.
Absolutely. All right. It sounds to me like Southern Ontario is gearing up for a very busy week ahead. We're a little wetter here, so we'll see if that happens. But, of course, big question right now is this corn crop. Let's start with, yes, a huge amount is still out there. I mean, the majority of the crop is still out there. Definitely still, of course, the concerns about dawn. We'll talk about that. But in particular, and you've talked about it on the Word as well, we've talked about it here, but why is the corn not drying down?
So, Lyndsey, that is a great question. And actually, I find it so fascinating that in some areas, the corn is drying down just fine. And I think you said your area is drying down just fine. My own corn on my farm is drying down just fine. And yet, when I go a little bit further north and we get into, it was a little bit wetter through some of the July time frame, and it's almost like that wet weather held that crop back enough in maturity, or maybe it was the drought in June, that it never quite got to full maturity. And so there are areas where the corn is still hanging up at 34%, and you just go, man, that's so hard to make a good sample out of. But it's very area specific, and even within areas, it's also variety or hybrid, I should say. Corn is hybrid, but hybrid specific. So Shane, my great technician, his corn, that particular hybrid is known for not fast dry down, and it's like it's stalled. Meanwhile, his dad has corn hybrids that dry down better, and they're coming down. They're not coming down fast, but they are coming down. So when you say, why is that? It all comes down to maturity and kernel characteristics and also husk cover. And husk cover also relates to dawn. So if that husk is staying tight, man, that corn will dry very, very slow because the moisture has to migrate through the husk, and that becomes nearly impossible.
We need a drying wind. But of course, that brings up my next question is about standability, because of course, the longer a crop is out, the more weather, the more adverse conditions that we may have to deal with. I certainly saw last week, we saw hail, we saw freezing rain, we saw all sorts of nasty stuff. What are we learning about standability of this crop? Is it still standing, Pete?
Yeah, and so again, very field and area specific. And that freezing rain, thank goodness that the freezing rain turned into just rain, that the temperature increased and it kept raining. Not that we needed the moisture, but the rain then melted the ice off the corn. And where we had the most freezing rain, the tops are all broken off on the corn plant. There is a few more lodge stalks in most fields because of the ice, but it could have been a real nightmare if that had have kept raining and that ice had have stayed longer and we got a big wind, because the added weight of that ice would have just made a lot of corn lodge. We are seeing certain fields and certain hybrids lodge. again, it comes down to just how much wind did you get, how much ice did you get, and the individual hybrid. There are huge differences in hybrid, and lots of people are talking, it's the fact that we didn't quite finish the crop, and so the stalk cannibalized itself, and it's more susceptible to stalk rots. And this is all true, but in many cases, there aren't that many stalk rots there that are causing this. And corn always cannibalizes itself to a certain extent. If we didn't get translocation of those carbohydrates from the stalk into the grain, we would never break 200 bushel per acre. We just couldn't do it. And we have growers out there that look like they might break 300 bushels this year. I cannot believe I'm even saying that. But corn always cannibalizes itself to a large extent, and I think this year it's just the difference in stalk integrity. And there's a few cases with low potash, with sandy knolls that were too droughted out. So some of those typical suspect fields are also having some issues. But overall, man, most of the crop is standing reasonably well, and thankfully, that makes harvest a lot easier.
Now, this brings up a few things, and one of the key questions for me is, how important is it to be taking good notes about this stuff? Because I know for me, it's really easy to look back and think fondly of things like, oh, the numbers turned out not bad or whatever. How key is it in noting all these hybrid differences, in keeping detailed notes about the differences between these fields and these hybrids?
So the problem always, Lyndsey, is that growers have a 1-year memory. And so right now, some of my clients are pushing me, Pete, come on, what are the winning hybrids this year? What are we going to order for next year? I keep going, it's too early. We're just at the start of harvest, and I haven't seen enough plot results. I haven't seen enough dawn tests come back, and we still have to get through all that. But yes, you have to keep notes so that you remember. And it's really funny you mentioned that, Lyndsey, because it's kind of, I'm doing my hybrid plot, and I knew that after the hybrid, I finished out that particular amount of seed that I had, and then I moved the next. And as I'm going across the field, it's like, well, I marked the hybrid plot, but dang it all, what hybrid am I in here now? I just can't tell. And thankfully, I had notes, so I could actually figure that out, because I was, after the ice, we got the hybrid plot off before the ice. After the ice, I was starting to see differences in standability and stalk strength, and also in dry down. So those notes were incredibly important. And pay attention. Like, you'll remember the lodging, because if you are harvesting lodged corn, you don't forget that. But you might not remember just how quickly things dry down. Hopefully you'll have the yield map that will help with yield and moisture, but having those notes and walking through all of those different things, and dawn levels, boy, that one for sure. We are going to kill a few hybrids this year. That's just the reality. There are some very bad actor hybrids out there. They have the yield, but a year like 2023, you're pretty much the death knell for anything that doesn't have some level of dawn tolerance.
If you take good notes, Pete, then you can compare notes. And maybe those, very susceptible hybrids in your neck of the woods might work really well for someone here in the East. So take good notes. And also, this is my, to beat this into people's heads, you always think you're going to remember. Right, Pete? You tell yourself, it's like, of course I'll remember. And then you do not remember.
Yeah. I am the poster child for that statement, Lyndsey. I am the poster child for that statement. When I'm doing this, like, how could I ever forget this? A month later, it's like, what did I do then? Man, I have no clue. So yes, notes.
Yeah.
Whether you're putting it into the monitor or on paper, I don't care, but get it down somewhere. Yeah.
Well, and I was just going to say, and maybe it's both. I certainly know lots of people that have, some sort of electronic, maybe it's a spreadsheet, maybe it's, software, but also, a lot of people have a calendar or a notepad and they're keeping those. And redundancy is not a bad thing if it's going to keep track of what's going on. So this is important. Whatever system you're using, make sure you actually use it and write that stuff down. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with Peter Johnson right after this.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground. We are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Agronomic Monday. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and this segment is brought to you by MNP. Seeking professional advice for your farm and business, MNP's team of agriculture specialists cover it all. Farm business planning and tax guidance to financial projections, farm succession, and risk management. Visit mnp.ca to connect with the experts today. All right, coming back in here, we've got Peter Johnson. We are talking harvest, of course, here, the very long harvest of 2023. Pete, we definitely need to talk dryers. We need to talk about bin storage, but really we need to talk about safety and the fact that we've had some dryer fires that have happened. What's the latest there?
So absolutely. In fact, a big commercial elevator caught on fire, and I didn't hear the final outcome, but it sounded like it was bad enough. The fire department was called in, and that dryer may well have been destroyed. And it just, when we're in a situation like this, and we talked about moisture, you have higher moistures, dawn levels. As soon as you have that jib in the kernel, it makes the kernel integrity less stable or less able to stand the impact of the rotor or of the cylinder if you still have a conventional combine. So we get more fines. And those fines are wetter, and they tend to bridge, and they tend to plug screens. And if you plug the screen, then you start getting hot spots. In some of the more batch dryers, smaller batch dryers, you can plug columns because the fines tend to congregate right in that spot. And once you get that, and the plenum is firing away at whatever, 220 or 230 Fahrenheit, it lights on fire. Once it gets super dry and that hot, you light it on fire, and that is all bad. So it just comes down to monitoring what's going on. I know some of the elevators are starting to try to clean the corn coming in, take some of the fines out, even though they're wet. Normally they don't like to do that, because what do you do with the wet fines? They don't keep very well. But several dryer fires, some of the local dryer maintenance people, they've just been running constantly trying to get to growers to fix things that have happened because of the fines in the crop. Know it's a concern, pay attention, you can manage it, but it can go south pretty fast if you're not watching.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Now, it does also, there was a conversation this past week that I had as well on, and you know, in Western Canada, it is very common. Bins, huge investments in bins, bin yards. Often, if you're buying more land, it's like, it's got a bin yard. Good. Here in Ontario, of course, we deliver a lot straight to port or straight to an elevator that's headed out the door. We don't see as much on-farm storage, but this year especially, and especially when we're talking about, you know, being that capacity to be able to dry down some corn and get it moving, just that I'm hearing more discussions about, you know what, I think more bin storage might really pencil out. So are you hearing something similar? How is that discussion going?
So Lyndsey, this discussion is ongoing almost every year. And you know, way back when Wheat Pete started, it's pretty naive, because it's kind of like, well, eventually we build so many bins that like we'll have more bins than we have crop. But you know, the yields on these crops continue to go up, and the corn crop this year is just awesome. So lots of growers talking about 220, 230, 240 bushel corn. And when you get that level of corn production, you need more bins or more silos to hold the crop. And we knew, I mean, when the seaway shut down, that sort of slowed down loading out boats, and I think they're catching up. But all of that plays because if you plan to get the soybeans out on a boat and you're still waiting because things got backed up and that bin or that silo is full of soybeans, it's not available for corn. And you just have to, it's always this managing, trying to figure out, do we have enough space? How do we get enough space? And if the corn crop was only 180 bushels per acre, or, you know, like it was back when I grew up, only 120 bushels per acre, we wouldn't need more bins. But man, having bins on farm really gives you so many more opportunities. If your soybeans are a bit damp, you can put them in the bin, you can aerate them to get them dry. There's limits there, so be careful. But that gives you an opportunity sometimes to run when the elevator won't take those IP soybeans at 17% moisture. Lots of things that bins can do for you. There's no wonder that you see more and more tin cans going up on farm, because they just make sense from an economic standpoint.
Well, and as you mentioned, especially if you're running anything like IP beans or you know, identity preserved anything, maybe you've got a specialty market for your cereals, maybe for your corn. But I think the key there is also, you know, when it's time to go, I would hate that it's bin space that stops you from harvesting, when that's a pretty easy solution on the grand scheme of things. So, you know, and hey, farms are getting larger too. You got to cover a lot of ground. You may not necessarily be able to get it direct to where it needs to go. I think a bin makes sense, but hey, run the numbers. Let us know what you think. Okay, let's leave it there for now, because I want to talk about organic matter, Pete. And you talked about this on the Word. We talked about building soil. We talked about building topsoil, building organic matter, and there are a couple schools of thought on what's possible. And last week on the Word, you talked about sort of that difference between up top and below, how it gets there, and you got some feedback on that. Where does that all sit?
Yeah, and so it's a really interesting discussion, and it's not a simple answer, right? There's so many different factors that come into play. And so just recently on Twitter, having a discussion with a grower in the Palliser Triangle of, you know, the dry corner of Saskatchewan, and he's no-till, and he's seen significant organic matter increases. And the reality is that you can't make organic matter if you don't have something for the soil biology to feed on. And his comment was, well, man, it takes me years to get to 240 bushel per acre wheat. You talk about 240 bushel per acre wheat in the, you know, the world record, or like it takes me years to get there. How is it that I'm getting more organic matter? Well, there's no question that the root exudates, you know, they make 5 times more organic matter than the residue we put back on top. And so a lot of growers will say, well, then it's not the biomass. But it is the biomass, because if you don't have biomass, if you don't have the above ground part of the plant photosynthesizing and making carbohydrates so they can exude those out of the root system, if you have less biomass above ground, you have less root exudates going out into the soil. And so this concept that you don't need, you know, a lot of biomass to make organic matter, you just need root exudates, it doesn't resonate. It doesn't work. You need the biomass to make the root exudates. And yes, root exudates are more important than the actual residue on the soil surface. 100%, I'll give you that. But nonetheless, if you don't have enough organic matter, enough residues there, you have to feed the bug substrate. And if you don't have the biomass, you want to increase organic matter, then you absolutely have to bring in some organic matter, some residues. And that's what I talked about on the Word, is importing that residue, because the residue still matters. And then there's more food for the bugs. But the other thing, in terms of the grower in Saskatchewan, that you have to realize is that organic matter, the bulk density of the soil matters when you do that organic matter test, and the depth that you go to matters when you do that organic matter test. So you have to be very accurate at a 6-inch depth sample. If you vary that by an inch, because in no-till it's just a different push into the soil, man, that will throw your results off. And if you don't correct for bulk density, then you can get wildly disparaging results that are absolutely not accurate. So it's more nuanced than you would think. And my last comment, Palliser triangle, temperature and moisture matter in terms of the breakdown side of that. So building is one thing, like adding things, but here in Ontario, I can add a lot, but because we're wet and we also have a fairly long growing season compared to Kindersley, Saskatchewan, for example, or even more so than up in the Peace River District, well, we get breakdown from the beginning of March till the end of October. And so with moisture and temperature, you break more down. It's just the natural way that soils respire, that biology works. If you're going to break more down, you got to put more in if you want to build up that organic matter. So there's many, many factors that come into play and you just have to be a bit careful when you see these massive increases. It's got to come from somewhere.
Oh, Pete, you're making my heart sing, because this is I love this discussion. I love that people call it out and say, wait, this is what's happening on my farm, but I don't have X, or it's different because, and realistically, yes, it's different, but it isn't when you think about it as a cycle. When you think about, right, the biomass, the root exudates, you think about the entire life cycle of those, the flora and fauna in the soil. You think about the crop, you think about that residue, you think about the organic matter being added. You do have to think about it in the sense of the length of your season as well, the moisture, the temperature, and how much faster that's going to drive cycles. And to me, what that says is we know that in Western Canada, we can grow organic matter, and partially that's because it's a shorter, drier season, but also it means that the importance here in Ontario to feed that soil, to feed that carbon into that cycle is just so important, because we have the capacity with that longer season and the moisture that soil can burn through it, and we got to feed it. So I really like that you've captured that whole cycle. And I also love that you get feedback that says, hey, wait a minute, here's what I see on my farm. Does this fit? And there is a way to explain it, but you got to have that conversation. And I just love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I love about that, Lyndsey, is that people are thinking about it, and they're using their critical thinking skills to say, wait, and then that means that Pete has to come back and say, okay, and here's the missing link in that critical thinking process, which is often what other people do to me when I get off base. They'll say, wait a minute, Pete, you totally missed this, and use those critical thinking skills. I love it.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, we'll leave it there for today. Thanks so much, Pete.
Thanks for having me, Lyndsey. Great job, and we'll see you again soon.
All righty, talk soon. Okay, and everybody else, that wraps up the show for today. If you've got any feedback, call that feedback line, 1-855-776-6147. If you would like to argue with Pete, it's P. Johnson at RealAgriculture.com. He loves a good debate. And I'll be back tomorrow with Tuesdays with Lyndsey, and frankly, all week. All right, cheers, everybody.